Welcome to another Indie Dev Showcase, highlighting the many indie games we play here on the channel. If you'd like to submit a game for a future video, please reach out. But otherwise, let's begin. For our first game of the showcase, we turn to Magenta Horizon. This is a 2D action adventure that is inspired by kind of, as the story page says, spectacle fighters like Smash and so on. The footage that you are seeing is taken from early access and may not represent the current version of the game. We play a Grim Reaper who has awakened 200 years after being put into a mysterious sarcophagus, and it's up to us to wander the afterlife to find meaning and beat up a whole lot of strange looking critters. The game here is going to be focused on you being able to use light and heavy attacks, dodge, jump, wall jump, all that great movement tech to get around these levels, solve puzzles, and try not to die. There are multiple difficulty levels that can range from very easy to I hope you get really good at this game. Now, I really like the visual design aesthetics. It reminds me a little bit of, say, the wackiness of a Helix. Combat is going to be, again, focused on you doing light and heavy attacks, and this is a very dodge-centric game. Now, it did get a little bit chaotic at times. The game likes to throw a whole lot of things at you, and enemies oftentimes don't have attack tells. Your light attack will not kind of stun lock them or knock them out, at least when we played it. And it can be very hard to sometimes get in on some of these enemies, especially some of like the weirder ones that have like more unusual attack patterns. The platforming was okay, although I think I had some issues with the camera sometimes, not giving me like a good viewpoint when it's like panning up or down or kind of moving vertically. Now, if you're hoping for like a roguelike or roguelite experience, this is not that game. Every level is 100% handmade, and you will have to figure out how to deal with the myriad of enemies and enemy groups. I did find a little bit, again, on the trickier side to play. Again, like the Smash Brothers style, you will have multi-directional aiming, and that can prove to be quite disastrous if you have dead zone issues, like on my controller. But definitely an entertaining game, and one that, when it does get released, I do want to see where the game is at. So if you like your action platformers with a whole lot of odd enemy designs to go with it, then definitely check this one out. We now go to Slayer's X Terminal. Gotta make sure I get the rest of this right. Slayer's X Terminal Aftermath, Vengeance of the Slayer. That is definitely a title, but not the longest title I've seen for a game. This is, well, a love letter to 90s grunge and 90s FPS play. You are trying to save the world as the last Slayer, and you must use your badassness and 90s catchphrases to do so. Each level will have you exploring a variety of environments, picking up all kinds of strange weapons that are, of course, analogs to your machine guns, shotguns, grenades, and so on. Levels have multiple secrets, alternate routes, and there are a few secret levels along the way. All the while, you'll be listening to music and looking at aesthetics that feel right at home in the 90s. This one is a game that, again, it knows what its inspiration and the market that it's aiming for. If you do not have any love for 90s design, 90s music, or catchphrases, this is definitely not going to be the game for you. But the gunplay here is very solid. There are a variety of enemies. You'll be using both range and melee once you get enough hack energy to kill the various enemies. And again, you're going to be seeing a lot of kind of like that modern retro look and feel to it. So if you are a boomer shooter fan looking for a game that is very much a boomer of the 90s, despite being made today, then you should check this one out. And now we go to Bread and Fred, a Rage-inspired 2D platformer. You play as the Penguin brothers Bread and Fred, who are trying to climb a mountain. And to do so, they must use the power of friendship and physics to accomplish this task. Now, the footage you're seeing is played single player. If you do not have a buddy To share in the challenge and pain of this game, you can play it solo and use a rock as your friend here. But the jumping and the physics are all built on kind of simulating movement and motion. When you throw a rock, or your buddy, the weight or the momentum will carry you further. You'll need to swing and release in order to do longer jumps, grab onto walls and ledges, and try not to fall and lose your progress. We're going by getting over it rules, so fall in the wrong spot and you can lose a whole lot of time. If you are not a fan of the kind of rage-based design or that kind of like jankiness of movement, this is not going to be the game for you. Doubly so if your friend doesn't like it as well, as you could easily ruin your friendship over this. But a very charming game nonetheless, and again, if you enjoy this particular style of kind of platforming and challenge, then this is certainly one worth playing because it's a very delightful concept, despite again the potential friendship ruining that it could cause. We now have Harvest Hunt. This is footage taken from the demo that may not represent the current version of the game. What we have here is a mix of horror, roguelike, and deck building. Your job is to protect a village from a mysterious creature that comes to invade it. To do so, you must complete a variety of tasks to gain the necessary resources and upgrades needed to survive. The maps themselves are going to be procedurally generated or randomly shuffled around. Your job is to complete a number of objectives on the map while the creature itself is hunting you down. You can set up traps and items that can help you before you start a map by consuming some of your resources. And the job here is to complete the objectives before the creature hunts you down enough times to take away all your health. Now, I found this one to be a little bit cumbersome to play. The creature, once he's on you, is kind of it, unless you can quickly run to a trap or something you have set up. I like the roguelike deck building angle of being able to select different cards that can make things easier or harder, and you having to decide how long to spend in a level collecting its bonus resources versus completing the task at hand. Now, with this being from the demo build, I don't know if things have been changed or made any easier to play in the finished game, which should be out relatively soon by the time this video is up. So this one comes with a recommendation if you're looking for something that's a little bit different from your standard like horror roguelike affair. We now go to something a lot later with Novalands. This game combines Forager and Factorio. We are, yet again, trapped on a mysterious planet, and to get off it, we must use the power of logistics, friendship, and upgrades to do it. So the game itself is going to be built on you, once again, crafting a variety of item-producing structures, refiners, completing quests, upgrades, and more. The game itself leans more towards the later or more casual angle of Forager rather than Factorio. If you're hoping for that level of depth and logistics, and even something like Dyson Sphere, you're not going to find that here. The game automates a lot of your tasks using the power of automation and logistics bots. As you build logistics bots, you can assign them to kind of each island using a radar or kind of a tower. The bots will do any jobs that you kind of set up, such as filling up crafters, transporting goods, etc., etc. And once you've got an island set up, it pretty much runs itself. As you play, you'll earn experience points by crafting, beating up enemies, completing side quests, and so on, which you can then use to apply upgrades. And the upgrades do a really good job of not only incentivizing you to keep going, but removing a lot of the early game kind of challenges. One of my favorite upgrades, and I think one that more games should really look into, is that you get the option to completely remove the need for lower tier resources. Essentially, the items that can be used or require those essentially becomes free. So you never have to build like the super low tier items unless they are specifically used kind of like as the intermediary for a mid or high tier resource. And you can do this several times, and it makes setting up on later islands, and kind of like that early setup period a thing of the past. There are boss fights and combat in this one, as you'll be able to upgrade to get different guns, improve your shielding and health, and if you so choose, you can either fight every boss, or by completing a side quest, you can befriend them and basically cancel out the need to do battle with them. The progression loop here is that as you make more and more progress, you'll be able to unlock more islands in the chain. Each island is its own biome or has its own side quests and things to deal with, and I do not believe that this is randomly generated, as each island will have specific resources and things you'll need in order to push forward. When you get to the end game, you will be able to then go into outer space and set up a massive space station, which will of course require ever more resources that will then unlock more features and so on. I enjoyed this one, but I did find that it got a little bit repetitive. It kind of lacks that evolution of the mechanics that we see out of Factorio or Dyson Sphere, where at some point you're now building towards a new goal, your kind of production lines and assembly will change, that kind of thing. This game doesn't quite go that far, and that does make it a really great entry-level game for automation logistics fans. So I would definitely recommend this game if you're looking for a lighter take on the automation logistics side, whether for a newcomer or if you're just looking for something to relax to that's not going to be too much on the heavy side. And for the last game of today's showcase, it is Patch Quest. One part roguelike Metroidvania bullet hell just for good measure. We have come to the land of Patchlantis in order to uncover its mysteries and get hit by all manner of bullets and patterns. The game itself involves you exploring the world. Now the world itself is not randomly generated. You're going to be finding specific kind of points of interest that will lock things in, such as shortcuts, boss fights, special resources, etc. You're going to be using the various patch-related monsters to help you. Each monster can be tamed, and once tamed, you'll ride them like a mount, and you'll gain access to their abilities. The more you use a monster, you'll be able to level them up, which will unlock better stats, as well as unlock other abilities they have access to. There is progression or meta progression in the form of unlocking new items and features that can show up based on how well you progress. Now, the trick of this one is that the longer you play during a run, it gets harder and harder. The enemy stats will continue to raise, so eventually you will be knocked out and sent back to the start. And you'll need to make use of your shortcuts and areas that you've unlocked in order to make further and further progress. Now, while this game may look all cute and innocent, it does get quite difficult. This is one where you're going to be hit by a whole lot of bullets, especially as things get harder for you. And it can be a little bit much if you're not used to the bullet hell style. Different monsters will also have kind of different ways of moving around, which will allow them to get through certain areas easier or harder depending upon what they have. If it's areas full of sticky traps and spikes on the ground, then a flying creature will certainly get through that a lot faster. But you'll also need to be able to catch them and make sure you have them available at a moment's notice. So this one was enjoyable. Again, if you're looking for a game that is certainly going to be on the challenging side with a lot of game to explore, then you should give this one a check. But if you're not a fan of bullet hell or a game that's going to keep forcing you to go as fast as you can before kind of time catches up with you, then it may not be the best fit. But with that said, we're going to wrap up the showcase this week. For all the games that were press key submissions, I would like to thank the developers. You'll find links to everything down below. If you let me tickle your game for a future showcase, please reach out. And with that said, everyone, thanks for tuning in, and see you real soon for some more indie game showcases. Thanks for watching, and a special thank you to our Patreon supporters. If you enjoyed the video, do the YouTubing stuff, be sure to visit our Discord and Patreon, and you're interested in more in my thoughts on design, check out my game design books.